Welcome to another audit walkthrough video from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, we're going to be going over Audit Area 3. This is Section D1. This is an application topic. Use observation and inspection to obtain evidence. And we're going to be doing that the SuperfastCPA way, which is diving straight into the questions to learn the material. Now, if you don't know much about our strategies, make sure you go to SuperfastCPA.com and sign up for our free 1-hour webinar training. Again, it's free, it's only 1 hour long, and we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam in that 1 hour. So make sure you check that out. In today's video, we're only going to be going over 5 questions, but SuperfastCPA Pro members get access to the full 10-question version of the video when we post it in the member forum. So if you like this and you like our other videos, make sure you check out becoming a SuperfastCPA Pro member because you'll get access to the full versions of these videos where typically it's 10 questions, but on YouTube, we're only going to go over 5 questions today. So let's go ahead and dive into the questions. All right, here we are at question 1, and something I always like to point out as a good strategy, and this might not seem super helpful right now, but this is a really good strategy you want to have for test day. You want to read the last sentence of the question first. Very frequently, the last sentence of the question is what the real question is. It's what you're actually supposed to be doing in the question. So reading that last sentence gives you the context for what you're supposed to be looking for through the rest of the question. Now again, in these smaller questions, maybe not as helpful, but it's still a very good habit to be in because you have no idea what you're going to be seeing on test day, so you want to be used to doing this. So let's go ahead and do that with this question. Which financial statement assertion is the auditor primarily obtaining evidence for by performing this observation? Let's go up to the top. An auditor observes the client's staff performing a physical inventory count at year end. So again, what financial statement assertion are they probably obtaining evidence for by doing this observation? So let's walk through the options. Option A, rights and obligations. Option B, valuation and allocation. Option C, existence. Or option D, presentation and disclosure. And we've talked a little bit about the assertions in previous videos, so you might kind of have a general idea of what each of them are and what they mean. So if you have an idea of what they're trying to do with this observation, then that's great. If not though, let's go ahead and dive into the explanation to kind of start learning about this. All right, here we are. The answer is C, existence. So that's the assertion that they're trying to, or at least they're most likely trying to obtain assurance for by doing this observation. So let's walk through the explanation. Observation involves watching a process or procedure being performed and is commonly used in audits to gather evidence about whether something is actually occurring or is actually present. And that makes sense. If you can observe that something is there, that's pretty good evidence that it is there, that it actually exists. When the auditor observes a physical inventory count, the primary goal is to verify that the inventory items physically exist, supporting the existence assertion. So again, with this observation, they are trying to assert that those pieces of inventory indeed exist. But let's read a little bit more. However, observation can also help provide evidence for completeness in different situations. And we didn't talk about that in the question, but I wanted to talk about it in this explanation. For example, observing whether receiving and shipping procedures are properly followed can help the auditor determine if all inventory movements are being recorded. Still, in this question, observing the count itself directly supports existence because the auditor is verifying that the recorded inventory is actually there. But don't forget that observation is mainly used for existence and completeness. Those are the 2 assertions that you're usually trying to prove or gain evidence about when you're doing an observation. So we learned a little bit about observation there. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 2. Which financial statement assertion is the auditor primarily supporting through this inspection? Let's go up to the top. An auditor inspects supplier invoices and receiving reports to verify the recorded cost of inventory. So again, what assertion are they trying to support with this inspection? So we're not talking about observation, we're talking about inspection. Let's go through the options. Option A, completeness. Option B, valuation and allocation. Option C, rights and obligations. Or option D, existence. So we talked about existence and completeness in the previous question. Could this be also trying to do that assertion, or is it something different? If you know what inspection is about, then you might know the answer. If not, that's okay. We're going to look at the answer together right now. All right, here we are. The answer is B, valuation and allocation. That is the assertion that they're probably trying to support with this inspection. So let's walk through this. The auditor is inspecting documentation to confirm that inventory is recorded at the correct purchase price and that costs are properly assigned to the correct period. This supports the valuation and allocation assertion. So that's kind of the idea behind valuation and allocation, is you making sure that things are recorded at the correct price or the correct amount and that they're properly assigned to the correct area or the correct period. This supports the valuation and allocation assertion. Like I said, this assertion deals with whether assets, liabilities, and related transactions are recorded at appropriate amounts and in the proper period. And I basically just said that, said it in a couple different ways. While accuracy is sometimes referenced separately from valuation and allocation, it's often included under the umbrella of valuation and allocation in this type of procedure. So by the way, frequently you will see valuation, allocation, and accuracy kind of as one assertion, even though technically they can kind of be separate assertions, but very frequently they are kind of sandwiched together. Inspection is a strong audit technique for verifying these assertions when the auditor needs to substantiate the amounts recorded. So we learned a little bit more about inspection there. Observation is you just observing something happening or something existing. Inspection is you trying to look at documentation and make sure that things are correct. You're going to use inspection for things, again, like valuation and allocation and accuracy. You're going to use observation for things like completeness and existence. All right, we learned a little bit about that and how that affects evidence. Now let's go to the next question. Okay, here we are at question 3. Which procedure is the auditor performing to obtain audit evidence? Let's go up to the top. An auditor watches an employee enter a password and approve a transaction in the client's purchasing system to evaluate whether proper approval procedures are being followed. So again, what procedure are they performing here? Are they doing A, confirmation? Are they doing B, recalculation? Are they doing C, observation? Or are they doing D, inspection? Now, of course, we're talking about observation and inspection in this video, but think about this. It's probably not too difficult. Come back when you're ready and we'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is C, observation. Again, that's probably not too difficult. So let's kind of go through this just one more time to make sure it's clear what observation is and when you use it for and what kind of audit evidence you use it for. The auditor is directly observing the employee's actions to assess whether the control requiring password entry and approval is being performed as described. This type of procedure is known as observation, where the auditor watches a process or control being carried out in real time. This is a test of controls. And remember, we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Test of controls, substantive testing, we talked about that in a previous video. So this is a test of controls, not a substantive procedure or a test of details. The auditor is not verifying a transaction's monetary accuracy, but is evaluating whether an internal control, and that's the authorization of purchases, is designed and operating effectively. Like, is it actually happening? Observation is commonly used in testing controls, especially when evaluating manual or user-performed processes like approvals or reconciliations. So in this case, this observation was a test of controls to get evidence about, is this actually functioning? Remember, tests of controls is where you're just trying to make sure that something is actually occurring. Remember, we talked about attribute sampling in the previous video, and basically you're just trying to figure out, did something happen? Yes or no? Very frequently, that's what a test of controls is, and observation is great for that. So we learned a little bit more about observation there. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 4. Which audit procedure is the auditor performing to obtain evidence? Let's go up to the top. An auditor examines a sample of customer invoices and related shipping documents to verify that recorded sales transactions actually occurred. So what are they doing to obtain evidence? Is it A, inquiry? Is it B, inspection? Is it C, reperformance? Or is it D, observation? Again, probably not too difficult to think of the correct answer. So think through this if you need to and come back when you're ready and we'll kind of expand on this. All right, here we are. The answer is B, inspection. Again, that probably wasn't too difficult, but I just kind of want to clarify and make it very clear when and why you're going to use inspection and what it's for. So let's go ahead and talk about this. The auditor is inspecting documents, specifically customer invoices and shipping records, to gather evidence that sales transactions recorded in the accounting records actually occurred. This supports the occurrence assertion and is part of a substantive procedure, more specifically a test of details of transactions. So that's the kind of test we're doing here, is a test of details of transactions. It's a substantive procedure. And again, they're inspecting documents to make sure that things are actually there, that they actually occurred. Now let's read the next paragraph. Inspection is a core audit procedure used to examine the documentation behind transactions such as contracts, invoices, or supporting records. It's not a test of controls here because the auditor is not evaluating whether a control is functioning. They are verifying whether individual transactions are valid and properly recorded. So in this case, we're using inspection not as a test of controls like we were using the observation as a test of controls. We're instead using it as a substantive procedure to make sure that things are actually recorded properly and they're actually valid. So that was just another question to kind of expand on inspection. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 5. Why is this second step necessary? Okay, let's go to the top. An auditor observes the client's inventory count procedures on December 31st to evaluate whether the count was conducted properly. The auditor then reviews the client's inventory records for January to confirm cutoff procedures were followed. So why are they doing this second step? Why are they reviewing the client inventory records in January when they already observed the inventory count in December? So let's walk through this. Option A, observation only provides evidence that inventory exists at year end. Option B, observation is not a valid audit procedure without recalculation. Option C, inspection of records is more reliable than observation for all assertions. Or option D, observation alone does not provide sufficient evidence over a period of time. Okay, so why do you think that they have to do inspection as well as observation in this situation? Think about it, and when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are at the answer. The answer is D. Observation alone does not provide sufficient evidence over a period of time. So that's why they're doing both of them. Let's kind of dive into that. Observation is limited to what the auditor sees at a specific point in time, such as year-end inventory counting procedures. It doesn't provide evidence about what happened before or after that point. That's why additional procedures like inspection of January inventory transactions are needed to test cutoff and ensure inventory was recorded in the correct period. This question teaches that while observation is valuable, of course it can be used to get evidence, it's inherently limited in scope. The auditor can't rely on it alone when evaluating whether procedures were applied consistently across a reporting period. So frequently, observation can't be its own procedure just by itself, totally by itself. Usually you have to do other procedures, other substantive procedures or other tests of details or other tests of controls, whatever the case may be. So just kind of wanted to point that out here that observation is good, but usually you have to do more, and inspection in this case was the additional procedure that you needed to do to kind of make sure that things were actually accurate. So with that, we learned a lot in 5 questions about observation and inspection. Before we do anything else, let's do one more part of the SuperFast CPA process called pillar topics. Now, the idea behind pillar topics is as you're going through the questions to learn the material, you will notice the things that keep popping up in the questions. You've seen 2 or 3 or 4 questions trying to teach you what assertions observation is usually trying to get evidence for, or maybe inspection, or whatever the case is. Again, these are the things you notice throughout the questions as you're going through your review course. So you take a moment and write these out in your own words as the most important things you learned. These are the pillar topics. And as you're doing this each day, you're building your own personal repository of the most important things you learned from the questions in your own words so that you are ready for test day. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pillar topics for this video. All right, here we are at the pillar topics. Let's just dive straight in. First off, let's talk about observation. Observation is used to watch real-time activities like physical inventory counts or shipping processes. It supports existence, so that would be things like verifying items are physically present, and completeness, and that would be things like ensuring all shipments are recorded. Now let's talk about inspection. Inspection involves examining documents or physical assets. It supports valuation, so things like verifying asset costs from invoices, rights and obligations, so that would be things like title ownership, and existence, that would be viewing fixed assets, and occurrence, that would be things like checking support for recorded sales. Now let's talk about tests of controls and substantive procedures. We kind of talked about this a little bit throughout the video, and it's something I'm going to expand on a little bit more in the next questions for the pro members. If the auditor is checking whether a control is working, it's a test of controls. If the auditor is verifying account balances or transactions, it's a substantive test. That's just kind of something very basic there that you probably should know the difference between test of controls and a substantive test. For example, watching an approval is a test of controls. Reviewing an invoice is a substantive test. Now let's talk about observation and expand on it a little bit more. Observation is limited to what the auditor sees during the observation period and doesn't cover activity before or after. Auditors often need to supplement observation with inspection or other procedures. And then finally, let's talk about inspection. It's generally more reliable than observation alone, and that's kind of like a repeat of that other pillar topic, but just in a different way. Inspection provides evidence that can be retained and re-evaluated, while observation is momentary and can't be re-reviewed. This makes inspection more reliable, especially for documentary support. And again, this video, we were talking about observation and how you obtain evidence with observation and inspection. So I hope this was all helpful. Again, we're only going over 5 questions in today's YouTube video, but remember, for SuperFast CPA Pro members, they will get access to the full 10-question version of this video. So they'll get a little bit more practice and a little bit more understanding. So make sure you go check out our SuperFast CPA training webinar, because that will give you a great path to learning about becoming a SuperFast CPA Pro member. And then, of course, if you become a pro member, you'll get access to a lot of great material. So with that, I hope this video was helpful. If you did like it, make sure to like it and leave a comment, and I will see you in the next video.